Remember, they were hiding behind the trees and they sewed fig leaves together. So what's the focus? It's the physical nakedness that they are being ashamed of. And that's what God said. Later on, when God confronted them, who told you you were naked? So God knows they were naked. But some of them told them. The serpent. No. It was the tree that gave them that awareness. Right? Who told you you were? Let's go Genesis chapter 3, verse 9 and following.
Where are you?
And God called to the man, where are you? But the man replied, I heard of you, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. So it must be negative, right? Next. Who told you you were naked? Did you eat? There's only one way you can know that. Only one way, Adam. Did you eat? So God is confirming that their awareness of their nakedness came from the fruit. He's confirming it now. Right? If that awareness or knowledge is knowing good and moral evil, then we are saying that becoming naked or being naked is a moral evil. And so God created moral evil and man had to cover it up. Man did a favor for God. God, you made a mistake. We better do something about this. We'll cover this. It's moral evil to be naked. Paano pag nagharap ang mag-asawa sa banyo? They are committing sin. Kasi they're looking at the nakedness, which is a moral evil. Now you tell me, is this interpretation correct? So is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil referring to moral awareness and moral knowledge? This story contradicts that interpretation. That's why I told you, everything in the narratives interprets itself. You go outside of that, you end up with contradictions with the context. You have to listen to the context. Okay? Here is another one. Second meaning is, no, not moral knowledge. They already had moral knowledge. Because according to the New Testament understanding, they were created in the image of God. They have, like God in what He is, they have moral awareness. How can you be created in the image of God in the sense of the New Testament understanding of becoming like Him in what He is if you have no moral knowledge? Right? And so the second interpretation tries to elude the complications or the contradictions created by the first interpretation by saying, no, this is not moral knowledge. They already had moral knowledge because they were created in the image of God. That's from a New Testament understanding, okay, not from the first layer of meaning. So, the question is, they said the word know in Hebrew is experiential knowledge. To know by experience. Correct. That's what know means in Hebrew. And so, this tree is able to impart experience of something morally good and experience of something morally evil. They already had moral knowledge before that, but they must experience it. Or they entered into its experience of moral evil. Okay? How many of you agree? Now, let's look hard at the context again. Okay? Now, if knowing by experience means to know moral evil by experience because you experience the effects of moral evil, we have two problems again. Number one, when God said, behold, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. Now, Jesus is not yet incarnated, okay? He's saying that God has experienced moral evil in Himself. Has He been guilty of committing something morally evil in order to experience it? Because He become like one of us, knowing good and evil. If the tree is able to impart experience, does God have an experience of committing a moral evil and suffering its effects? Secondly, when they realized, they knew they were naked, is that an experience of something morally evil? We may say partly. Because the embarrassment, the moral evil they committed was disobedience. And because they committed that moral evil, now they have experienced the effects of that moral evil, of disobedience. They became naked. They realized they were naked. They were already naked, of course. Okay? Or the judgment that later on be pronounced on them by God. Death. Painful toil of the womb for the woman, painful toil on the ground for the man. That is an experience of the effects of moral evil, right? Now they are experiencing it. So, they interpreted, this tree has the power to impart that experience of knowing moral evil by experiencing it. Okay? How about God? Yes, become like one of us. Knowing by experience good and moral evil. You mean God is involved with moral evil, so he experiences it? Is he guilty like man and woman of disobedience against his own laws, and therefore suffer the effects of that moral evil in himself? Now you judge, you tell me. So what does it mean when God said, behold, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil? If knowing by experience, that God also has direct experience of moral evil itself, which means that he is also guilty of committing moral evil, just as Adam and Eve did. What do you think? Does this interpretation hold against the context? Now let's go to the third. Sexual awareness. In the Old Testament, to see somebody naked is tantamount to having sexual intercourse with a person. Kasi after the universal flood, Noah got drunk. At sa sobrang pakalasing niya, nag-strip siya. Siyempre, mainit. No? Pag marami ka ininom na, iinit talaga katawan mo. Nag-strip siya naked. And so Ham was the first one to see his father in the cave. And so his father, tinignan niya talaga. And then, kiniwento chinismis doon sa dalawang kapatid. Panganay si Shem, pangalawa si Ham. Bunso si Ham. Pangalawa si Shem, pangalawa si Japheth, bunso si Ham. Okay? So Shem and Japheth, when they heard about it, they did not dare look at their father, but took a blanket, put it on the shoulders, and walked backwards and covered their father's nakedness without looking. And nung nagising si Noah, nung nalaman niya, sinumpa niya yung lahi ni Ham. And in the law of Moses, in the laws of outlining sexual sins, one of the sexual sins outlined in the book of Deuteronomy is that when you see the nakedness of your father, the nakedness of your mother, you already are guilty of immorality. Just as Jesus said, if a man looks at a woman with lust, ano ibig sabihin? Ini-imagine mo, hubad yung babae, lust eh. You already committed adultery in your heart with her. So, to see the nakedness is to have sexual intercourse. This is where they got the idea. So, to know good and evil is to have sexual awareness. Kasi ngayon, na they realized they were naked. So, the sexual, are now aroused. You agree? So, ang Diyos pala, may sexual arousal din. Kasi God also knows good and evil. He has become like one of us, knowing good and bad. If knowing good and bad, something is sexual, then God is also having some sexual desires. True. Alright? Arousal? Huh? How can God have that? God has no physical body. His spirit. And he cannot have any sexual desire because his spirit is not a human body that has a need for sexual fulfillment. Like us, we have a body. So, the sexual awareness interpretation hold in the context?
No, they were told to go and multiply.
That's the point. That's the second point. The second point, why would God forbid to them the very tree that will help them multiply? If that is the meaning of the knowledge of good and evil. So God is going against his own command. That's the point. Very good, well made. Okay, tatlo na. Pangapat. Wisdom. Yung suggestion ni Sister Mimi. Why wisdom? Because of the words of the woman herself. Genesis chapter 3 and verse 6. This is where the interpreters got the idea. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom. What attracted her to the fruit? 3 things. Nakakalaway, good for food. Desirable, pleasing to the eye. Alam mo naman, pag na supermarket na, open display. Kahit wala sa listahan, nabibili kasi kailangan ko to. Di ba? Na-offense sa mga ladies, ha? I'm just showing the psychology of the open display in the supermarkets. Yung pa yung psychology nun. Para bumili ka na hindi mo kailangan. O hindi, makabili ka na hindi mo balak bilhin. Okay? So anyway, pleasing to the eye. Right? And desirable. So, desirable to gaining wisdom. So, she's thinking of gaining wisdom from the fruit. Okay? So, these interpreters say, this must be the interpretation. And it's in the context. Sa lahat ng interpretations, ito po ang mas maraming, sabihin natin maraming pogi points from the context of the story. Wisdom. So what is wisdom? In the book of Proverbs and the wisdom literature of the Old Testament, we get the idea that wisdom is the ability to discern, between what is good in God's eyes and what is evil in God's eyes. So nagbibigay siya ng wisdom. Tama? Correct? Agree? Ready to change your views now? We have a problem. And they knew they were naked. How does wisdom apply to that?
So they fear God.
So in what sense are they now wise by knowing she is wicked, she is naked? What's wrong with being naked? If that's wisdom. Is there anything wrong with being naked when God created them that way? Wisdom's ability to discern between moral good and moral evil. So it goes back to the moral knowledge. It goes back. Tama? Unless you interpret wisdom, hashkil in Hebrew, in a different way than what the Old Testament teaches. And there are certain concepts that wisdom is able to choose between what is expedient and what is detrimental. It doesn't have to mean morally evil all the time. Okay? So how do you apply that to knowing they were naked? How does wisdom apply there? What's expedient or not expedient about being naked yet? So, you see the problem with the wisdom interpretation? Now, for the point of view of Eve, she thought it will make her wise. That's just her opinion. But it actually did something really different. Okay? So if you use her words as the means to interpret what knowing good and evil is, there seems to be a problem there. Okay? Omniscience. Why did some interpret omniscience? Because in the Old Testament, there are certain usages of 2 extremes of the same thing to refer to the whole. Like, and God created heaven and earth. That means everything that exists. So you call that a merism. A merism refers to the entire whole by mentioning its opposites. By mentioning the 2 extremes, you're actually referring to the whole thing. Okay? So when you're saying, and God created the heavens and the earth, that's the 2 opposites there. And therefore it means God created everything that exists. It's a merism for everything that is. And so some understand that knowing good and evil, because in certain parts of the Old Testament, that actually can be interpreted as merism. Like I remember that David was imputed to have no knowledge of good and evil. That's why he seems to know everything. Okay, I am trying to from memory. My memory can be wrong. But there are certain passages where good and evil can be a merism of everything that can be morally known. Okay? But the interpreters of this particular verse said that the knowledge of good and evil encompasses everything that can be known by mentioning the extremes of what kind of knowledge you may acquire. So that means men and women, if they eat, they will know everything. That's why omniscience. The question is, can man be omniscient? Only God is omniscient. Only now God can know all things. For man to acquire that knowledge, it seemed to have backfired because when they ate, they knew they were naked, and that's all they knew. That's all they knew. Okay? So, problem with that interpretation. So, the wisdom, medyo okay na kasi nasa context. Pero you have to look hard and see how that applies to God because also God claims to have that knowledge. Does it fit, the interpretation fit God in His knowledge of good and evil? So, agree kayo lahat ng ilan yun? 4 ba yun? 5. So, yung 5 ba yun, meron pa ba sa inyo magsasabi na may very strong ang mga points nyon? Ako, sa akin, may problema talaga. So, that's why this is Rediscovering Genesis. Remember, everything you need to know about what it is saying is already in the narrative. Just stick to the context. Kaya ang dami-dami mga problems and kasi yung mga ideas coming from different sources. And some come from the text, kaso lang medyo hindi talaga properly studied well to see kung consistent ba yun. Okay. So are you ready for a contextual understanding of the knowledge of good and bad? First of all, I do not translate it as knowledge of good and evil because obviously awareness of moral evil cannot be held against the context if that is the interpretation. We can use their knowledge of good and bad. Bad means something that falls short of standard, something that is not complete in itself. Okay? Here is our clue. We are actually giving clues in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. All the clues are there as to the meaning of the knowledge of good and bad. So I won't call it evil because that is a bias of the translation. So always insisting that right here must mean moral evil. I just say good and bad. Okay ba sa inyo yan? It's knowledge of good and bad. What kind of bad is this? We will see in the context. In Genesis chapter 1, the Word of God says that, and God saw it was good. And God saw it was good. And God saw 7 times. And then in Genesis 2, verse 18, it is not good for the man to be alone. Notice it is God evaluating creation all the time. Are you still here? He is evaluating creation all the time. He alone has the right to evaluate what He has created and make conclusions about what He has created, whether they're good according to His purpose or they're not good or bad in terms of His purpose. Because in everything that God has created, His purpose stands as the motive behind everything He does. So if something meets His purpose, good! Not good for the man to be alone because my purpose is not yet complete. Do you understand this? Now, I want you to study carefully Genesis 1 use of in God so it was good. It's Genesis. I'll give you the verses, okay? And you'll notice that where those words appear. First is in verse 5, separation of the light and the darkness. The creation of light. And let there be light, and God saw that the light was good. Verse 4, and God saw that the light was good. And then the next is found in verse 10. Called the dry ground land and the gathered waters He called seas, and God saw that it was good. That's number 2. Okay? The next one is in verse 12. I want you to notice the context where God says it was good. Pag-aralan niyo mabuti yung context. Okay? And the next one is in verse 18, 17 to 18. God saw it was good. Pang ilan na? 4. Okay, the next one is in verse 21. Study carefully context. So you have an idea what it means to be good. Next is in verse 20. Verse 25. Okay, pang ilan na yung verse 25? 6. Okay. Look at the context. It's always a result of something God has done according to His expressed will and purpose. And finally, verse 31. This is now the summary statement. He looked at everything He made. And notice, very in Hebrew is mi'od. It can be translated, and behold, it was exceedingly good. Okay. Excited ang Diyos. Tapos! It is finished. Complete. Okay? Now, of all the days of creation, I want you to listen. Only in the second day is the statement, and God saw it was good, is not mentioned. Only in the second day. First day, third day twice, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day, except second day. There's no mention of it was good. Take a look now at 6 to 8 is day 2. Okay, did you see it? God saw it was good. In the evening and the morning were the second day. That's how it ends. Nothing is mentioned. But in the next day, 3, twice it will be appear. It was good and it was good. That's why covering up for the total 7. Why is it that God never said it was good, or the Word of God said it was good on the second day? Remember, day 1, He created light. Okay? And what does God create in day 2? He separates the waters above and the waters below. Right? Tama? Okay. Day 2. Day 3, He separates the water from the land. You see, God was not yet finished with the waters in day 2. He will finish His work on the waters in day 3 when He separates the waters and let dry ground appear, and then He creates the vegetation. It's fertile land. You got that? Because God is not yet finished with the waters, He cannot say it's good. So what does good mean in Genesis 1? The good. It was good. So what does good mean in Genesis 1? You tell me, based on what you're seeing. Complete, fulfilling God's purpose, fully fulfilling God's intention. There's nothing lacking. Exceeding good, every need has been met. Okay? Every need has been met. That's exceedingly good. Verse 31. So good means what? Complete. Fulfilled, lacking in nothing. Every need has been met. Everything carries out God's purpose. You got that? So when you go to Genesis 2:8, and God saw it was not good, is it morally evil? No. Not good for man to build because there was something yet not complete. Not yet finished. Not yet complete. Are you still here? What was incomplete? Why? Because in Genesis 1, verse 27, please read, this was God's intention. And 1:27, He was to create them male and female. That's His plan. And so God created the man first, gave him His law, and then God said, it's not good for the man to be alone because His purpose was to create the woman to be His counterpart. You understand? So without the woman, God's work of creation on man is not complete, just not yet finished, doesn't carry out His purpose. There's something lacking. A need is not being met. And what was the need? The man's need for a companion. So God creates somebody who meets the need. So you see, the idea of good is that God is able to adequately meet the needs of creation and thereby carrying out His purpose. In Genesis chapter 1, you see a God who works to meet needs in creation, and we see something about God in Genesis 1. Listen to this very powerful truth about God. It is the nature of God to meet needs. And if a need is not met, it's not good. To carry out His purpose, every need must be met. That's why it's not good for man, because there's a need there that's still standing that needs to be met. And so God creates the one. Therefore, now it becomes good. After all the days of creation, behold, it was exceedingly good. Now, you have a clue. See, this knowledge belongs to God alone. Only He has the right to evaluate, because only He knows His purpose. Only He knows His design. Only He knows how to meet every need. For man to acquire that knowledge, it will be tragic. Because we will acquire a knowledge of lacks and needs, and yet we don't have the power to meet those needs. Only God has the right to have that knowledge, because only God, who can see the need and the lacks, has all the power to meet those needs. That's why that knowledge is safely should belong to God alone. In too much knowledge, we suffer because we are able to meet all the needs we see. With much knowledge comes much sorrow, according to Ecclesiastes. Because that's not supposed to be ours. You understand this? It's the knowledge of what is complete and what is not yet complete. Now, and also, and they knew they were naked. Listen to this, very interesting. Who told you you were naked? So does God know they were naked? Okay. I'll give you the analogy of the tree of life. Was God meant to live forever without the tree of life? Without the tree of life? Remember what the Lord said, lest they stretch their hands and eat of the tree of life and live forever. That's what the text says. Please go back to it. Genesis 3. The man has become like one of us. Okay? So, if you eat of the tree of life, you will live forever. It is the fruit that sustains eternal life. So when they are driven out without access to the tree of life, the implication is that they cannot live forever outside of the tree of life. Okay? So there is a need that is being met by the tree. That's why it's there. Okay? When God created naked, question, did God ultimately mean them to be naked? Because later on, God clothed them with permanent clothes, unlike the leaves, which will not last forever. Was the clothing part of the divine purpose? Then why did God allow man to be tempted? God already knew what was going to happen. He knew they will disobey Him. And He knew they will recognize something is lacking. That they were naked. God knows they were naked. Who told you you were naked? That means I know you are. But you don't. Because you don't have the knowledge yet like I have. I can evaluate things. When I decide when something's missing and something's lacking, now you have the knowledge. Now you know something's lacking. And I purposely intended that because I will be the one to answer the need. And you will see how inadequate you are in meeting the need. And they asked and they knew something's missing. How do you know something's missing? They had to do something to make up for what's missing. What's missing? A covering. Something's lacking. They acquired knowledge from God. It's like God. Behold, the man has become like one of us. God affirms, just like us, able to evaluate and know whether something is complete in my purpose or not. And though I got it rightly, but I don't want him to continue in the state because they disobeyed me. You are dust, and to dust you shall return. Because of what you have done. In that day you will die. God has to carry out His word. That's why He banned them from the garden. No access to the tree of life that can make them live on forever. Okay? So what is the knowledge of good and bad? The awareness, the adequate awareness of the lacks in creation that only God can meet. The awareness of needs. that God sees that only God can meet. It's not good for the man to be alone. Did Adam feel lonely when God said that? Did Adam feel alone? When God said it is not good for the man to be alone, is he saying man is too lonely? Is that what he's saying? Remember, Adam was not even aware that he was alone until he made contact with the animals and started to find names for them. Take a look now, Genesis chapter 2, verse 19 to 20. That's why to interpret, you have to study the context hard. Read every word because every word matters. This is selective history. Every word is carefully chosen to help us understand the meaning of the narrative. All the interpretations are there in the text. You don't have to go out. Okay? So what do we find there? And whatever the man called his living creature, that was his name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds of the air, and all the beasts of the field. But for Adam, no suitable helper was found. Now, can you start in verse 18? So after God said, I will make a helper suitable for him. What did God do? Did God create the woman immediately? May intermission. Right? I will therefore make a helper suitable for him. And God brought all the animals of the field and the birds of the air, to Adam and see what they will name. Anong connection nun sa I will make a helper suitable for him? Ano, magpa-fashion show to lahat ng mga hayop para piliin niya maging helper niya? Bakit ginawa ng Diyos yun? Pwede naman niyang pakasabi, I will therefore make a helper suitable for him. Then immediately creates the woman. Di mas logical yung story, right? Right? Ito parang may intermission Anong connection ng naming of the animals sa I will make a helper suitable for him? Yun ang sabi sa verse 18, that was his decision. After assessing the need, it's not good. Doesn't complete my purpose. Something lacking. I have to do something. Okay? Not good. And then I will make help. Then verse 19, tinawag niya mga hayop. So ating interpretation sa una, magpa-passion show yung mga ito. Tapos namimili siya doon. And look at verse 20. Wala nga siya nakita. Yun, namili nga siya. Namili nga siya. Wala nga makita. So when did he arrive at that awareness that he was alone? When did he arrive at the awareness that he was alone? After the encounter with the animals. Because nobody was like him. That's why nung binigay ng Diyos ang babae sa lalaki, yung lalaki ready na to appreciate. You see, God sees the needs in your life first. You don't see them. God will bring you to a situation in your life, you will become aware na itong kailangan mo. Kung minsan kailangan mo, sabi niya, Lord, kailangan ko ng kotse. Traffic, Lord. No, at least may kotse ako, makakalusot-lusot ako. Ganyan, di ba? Kulang ka sa exercise. Ang real need mo, mag-exercise kasi hindi mo alam, malipat ng buhay mo. Nakakulang na exercise. So nakikita ang need mo, kotse, nakita ng dos, mag-exercise ka, gusto ko mababuhay mo. Sometimes we do not really see our real needs. All we have are felt needs, and our felt needs are always biased to what we want. God is the one who sees the real needs. And there will be times in life when God will bring you into a situation when you realize, anong real need mo? Family ko pala, kulang na ako ng oras sa asawa ko, puro ako ministry. Yung asawa ko, mamatay na. Nung na-realize, mali ka, priority mo. Nakita mo ngayon yung real need mo na matagal nang alam ng Diyos. Pero hindi mo makita. Kasi iba yung felt need mo. Yung need mo to be approved, to be successful in the ministry, to, yun yung felt need mo, but that's not your real need. Your real need is to love your wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. You understand that? And what God brought is that he made Adam aware. It became a felt need after his encounter with the animals. He never felt the need yet until the encounter. And when he was ready, because he felt the need, then God answered the need. You see, God will not meet your need until you're aware of it. And when he is ready to meet your need, he will bring you to an awareness of that need, so that when the answer comes, you will give God glory. Mahirap ka magpasalamat sa isang bagay that you feel you don't need, di ba? Kasi hindi mo alam ang real needs mo. Naintindihan po natin? Nilalambing ka na ng asawa mo kasi puro sobra busy ka. Pero ayaw pa rin, hindi mo pa rin mag-gets. May nangyari sa asawa. Ngayon, lahat ng oras mo nasa kanya. Di ba? Nakuha po natin. God has been telling you all the time what your real needs, but sometimes we're so convinced about what my felt needs are, we cannot understand what your real need is. And God will bring you to a situation in life where you become aware, ito pala ang kailangan ko talaga. Okay? Kaya pagdating ng babae, anong sabi ng lalaki? Now at last! In the Hebrew. This is bone of my bones and flesh of my, like not those animals, their bones are different, their flesh is different. This is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. And the word in Hebrew, this is now, the word now, nah in Hebrew means sa wakas. That means he started to search. And because there was now a desire, God now meets the need so that he will appreciate God. And indeed, man appreciated it because he felt the need. So when God said it's not good for man to be alone, he's not talking about the felt need of Adam. It was talking about his purpose, his plan. For male and female must reflect his image. Hindi lang male, pati female, both reflect his image on earth. And therefore, one is not complete with another. From his purpose, he saw something lacking from his evaluation, not from man's evaluation. And that is now the knowledge that man acquires when he eats the forbidden tree. Now they're aware something's lacking. And she was right, because later on God will clothe them. But God allowed them to go to the experience to show only God can adequately meet every need and lack that you see. You can't. Those leaves don't last long. What is the moral lesson of this experience? God alone reserves the right to know what's good for you or not. God alone knows what is lacking and what is not lacking. And sometimes he has to bring you to an awareness of what you really need, because we don't know our needs most of the time. That's why Paul confirms that in Romans chapter 8, verse 26 to 27, the Holy Spirit helps us in our weakness, in that we do not know what to pray for. We tend to be blinded to our real needs. Sometimes you feel your need is money. Actually, your need is to spend more time with God, because that's where all the money comes from. Understand that? God alone has the right to know, because only God has the right to meet every need you see. Now we have the knowledge, right? Are you aware of lacks around you? Especially after God has cursed the ground. God has created more needs now on earth because of the curse of God. There's a need now to survive, a need to, to look for fertile land, because now God has cursed the ground. It will not be cooperative anymore. God created a world where there's so much lack and so much need for the purpose of humbling man, so he will go back to God, because he recognizes that no matter what need this is, he cannot adequately meet every need, and that will make him suffer. And the only key to his suffering is to go back to God and let God meet those needs that he cannot meet. Do you understand that? Everything that the New Testament teaches, the importance of prayer, to come to God, give us today our daily bread. This is God's original intention that man tried to kick out of his life by acquiring that knowledge. Now that he has knowledge of so many lacks, what's the answer? Come to God in prayer. Don't try to solve the problem your own, because you'll make it worse. And the more you try, and the more you realize how inadequate you are to meet those needs. That is the result of that awareness we now have. We now have evaluative powers like God. But the sad thing is that though we see so many needs now in a cursed world, in a world of sinful men, there are more needs than meets the eye. We feel so burdened and crushed because we cannot meet all the needs we see. And that is God's way of allowing that knowledge that we have acquired to humble us and bring us back to God. What is the result of that knowledge? Sorrow and suffering. Ecclesiastes say, with much knowledge, with much study comes much weariness. With much knowledge comes much sorrow. Because the more you know, the more you suffer. That was what God was sparing us from. Because only God can see the need and can meet every need. Because He is God. And now that we have that knowledge, our only recourse is to pray. And let God meet a need I could never meet. I thank you, Lord, that even though I have this knowledge now because of my Edom, it brings me to my place of humility, knowing that I cannot meet all the needs I see. All the lacks I see in my life, I cannot meet it. I have the knowledge now. But I realize I am not God. I need you. Change what I cannot change. Meet the need I can never meet. And that is where God will show, I told you so. I alone am God, not you. Now you have the awareness that I have. But you see, you don't have the power to meet the needs. So it humbles us. You see, when you see knowledge of good and bad in its context, everything makes sense. The whole narrative now makes sense. Because you arrive at the correct understanding of that knowledge of good and bad because of the context. It's all over the context. Amen? How many of you suffer the more you know about your lacks and the lacks in this world? The more we suffer, and God ensured we will suffer because He created the world where more lacks are there because of the curse and because of the sinfulness of man. It has created so many lacks in the world. And that makes us suffer. Just to know it makes us suffer. Masasaya pa yung mga bata natin, walang alam sa mga problema. Masaya sila. You know, children are very happy because they do not know have a knowledge of those problems. They have no evaluative powers yet like us as they grow up. You understand that? They're innocent in the sense that they don't know, oh, problema pala yan. Paano naging problema yan dati? Kasi wala tayong pera. Ah, ganun ba? Kaya sabi ni Jesus, have the faith of a child. Because you recognize there are so many lacks around you that you cannot meet. But if you have the faith of a child in his father, you know Daddy will take care of that. And you don't have to suffer anymore. Because you have childlike faith. Your daddy knows. Your daddy will answer that. My daddy's in charge. My daddy can take care of that. E di ang saya ng buhay. Eh kaso masyadong pinahahawakan yung knowledge na yan eh. Eh alam ko kasi ganito. Eh alam ko ganyan. Kulang ito, kulang yan. Ay, mamamatay ka ng maaga pag ganyan. Puro ka knowledge of good and bad. Yan ang ginawa sa atin, ang kaalaman na yan eh. Pinahirapan tayo eh. Pero the only answer is childlike faith in God. And we overcome because of our faith. You overcome all things. That's in 1 John chapter 5. Okay? So any questions at this point? Naubos na oras natin. Doon lang tayo sa knowledge of good and bad. Okay? The rest of the outline actually talks about the Genesis 3, what happened there, what were the consequences of man's disobedience against God. When we go there po, next week, we will discover that Ezer, which is the Hebrew word there, actually means a source of strength or a source of support. The word azar, where it comes from, actually means to surround in order to protect. That's why the bones that surround the heart to protect it is the rib. That's where the woman was taken to symbolize her function, which is to become a support to the man, an emotional source of support. Because she was designed by God to be primarily a relational being, the one who gives emotional support. That's the role of the woman. Okay? Because men, being performance-oriented, tend to be sensitive to failure, especially in a cursed world, especially after the fall. Man becomes sensitive to failure. The woman is created to support him, to inspire him, encourage him, to draw out the best in him. That is the purpose of woman as Ezer. A source of support, a source of strength, somebody who can bring out the best in the man if the woman knows how to fulfill her function. Ang problema ngayon, mga women, tendency, lalong binababa yung asawa imbes na itaas. Hindi man yun ang purpose ng Diyos sa babae. That's why women are commanded to respect their husbands at all times. Amen, Oma? They were right in the sense that based on the context of Genesis 3, we see that man, the body of man at Christ was designed to live for a long time. That's why even apart from the tree of life, the longevity of man before the flood was very long, up to Methuselah 900 plus years. The human body was designed to live for a long time. But it is the tree of life that imparts eternity. You live forever. Okay? God had to banish man out of the garden because he gave a death sentence. Therefore, it's not allowed anymore to live forever. And the only way to that is to have access to the tree of life. So God banned that. So that as he ages and, he will die ultimately. Even though he may live for long. You understand this? Because of the death sentence. Okay? So, the other point, yes, the garden, man cannot have access to the tree of life and in the garden because God already banned them out. Because of the death sentence. You are dust and to dust you shall return. So, no way can they access the tree of life according to God himself and live forever. No way. Ban them out.
Pero yung kanyang interpretation, Pastor, was kung nagkasala na siya at kumain siya doon, he'll be forever
Living in that sinful state.
In that sinful state. Tama din yon.
There have been many theories about the location of Eden because remember that topography of earth was completely changed after the flood. The flood was described by Genesis chapter 7 as both tidal and atmospheric in nature. The fountains of the great deep burst forth. That was the first thing mentioned. The fountains of the great deep burst forth. That means water, subterranean water, suddenly boom, blew out into the surface. So this was waters under the earth. But they suddenly broke through. And the only force that can make that happen is volcanic eruptions. There will be upheavals from the core of the earth that will cause landmass to go up, break through the surface, and then all the waters can come out after the lava comes out. Okay, so it was very violent. The flood was very violent. And then the waters that were separated up there in the atmosphere now is allowed to condense. Remember, before the separation of the waters, the whole earth was covered by the deep. So what happened in the Noah flood story is that it was an act of uncreation. The flood was an act of uncreation because in creation, God separated those waters so that God can bring out dry ground. Now those waters above were now allowed to condense back, bringing the state of the earth back to where it started. In Genesis chapter 1 verse 2, where the deep covers the whole earth. Okay? So, it was very violent. That's why the distribution of forces around the world perfectly justified because of a universal flood. In fact, the fossil record is the strongest geological evidence to the universal flood, not really for evolution. Because you cannot talk about fossils if according to evolutionists, everything from before happened in a natural process. I mean, how can animals bury themselves suddenly to be preserved? Don't tell me that ancient times animals have a way to dig their hole and then when they die, they throw themselves and die and so they get preserved. Obviously, they die out there in the surface where predators can destroy, erosion can destroy all evidence of bones. Even bones will not be left. But how come we have thousands upon thousands of fossil deposits around the world? The universal flood is the only most logical, most coherent explanation of the fossil record phenomena. Because when animals die in the midst of a flood, they tend to descend. Okay? And then layers of sediment will cover them because of the violent nature of the flood. Layers of sediment will cover them. Then other animals who survive will die, sink down, layers of sediment. Layers of sediment. By the time that the waters were no longer violent, everything began to be more still. Layers of sediment cover the dead animals. The waters abated, the sun shone, And the heat of the sun turned the sedimentary layers into rock, thereby effectively trapping the animals in sedimentary rock, thereby preserving them for many years to come. You understand that? You see, sedimentary rock is rock laid down underwater. And the majority, 90% of all the fossils around the world are found in sedimentary rock, which is what rock laid down underwater. It is the most powerful evidence for the universal flood, rather than for evolution. Because if evolution progressed according to its own method, there will be no fossils left. Because none of those will survive the powers of erosion and the predatory animals that feed on the dead. There will be nothing left. It takes I call that a catastrophe to create that kind of fossil record. It has to be universal because the fossil deposits are around the world, not just in one place. Okay? That's why in the New Jerusalem that will come down from heaven, the tree of life will be there for the nations, for the healing of the nations.
Is it still guarded with the angel? Is it like
Well, it's going to be in the New Jerusalem, no longer in a garden. It will be in the New Jerusalem. Yeah, the Word of God says that, chapter 22, the New Jerusalem, the tree of life will be there. No, the original Eden was on earth. But later on, in the visions of John, he saw the tree of life in heaven. Okay? It was obviously relocated. Okay? So, I'm answering a question. Where is Eden? It's very hard to say because after the flood, the topography of the earth was changed.
But we were able to recognize or identify Cush.
Yeah, because of the Euphrates and the Tigris, because they are still named by those names, if we believe that the civilization after the flood continued the names of this river as they were named before the flood, then where the headwaters are, that is where Eden was. Okay, yun lang po. That's the only conjecture we have. But again, nobody has found the Garden of Eden there in Iraq. Okay, it seems that it was been relocated, Dr. Ramini, before the flood. Okay, and no more questions. We'll close this time session and we'll go to our small groups.